This is my wife, AJ, and along with our 4 kids, we run Holsinger Homeplace Farms. We're pretty lucky. The kids are the 10th generation on this family farm that was originally purchased in 1773. 72 acres here on what we call the home place. The silvopasture we put in, we took what was continuous grazing of 72 acres, and we split it up and didn't have shade or windbreak for our animals. And so we have built what people call silvopasture, a 2-story agriculture, where we utilize trees as an additive for our farm, both as a forage source or a fodder source, windbreak, shade, as well as creates a microclimate underneath those trees. My kids are the 10th generation on the farm, and we want to put together a system that we can pass on to hopefully our grandkids down the road. The silvopasture, a book by J. Russell Smith called Tree Crops, and it talked about utilizing different types of trees in agriculture to provide secondary sources, not just wood, but also black walnut as a food source, or pecans. We use locust trees, honey locust, black locust. The pods off of honey locust are high in sugar, or the leaves off of black locust. The cattle love them, and ultimately we're a major food source for us for probably almost a month this year. After I read the J. Russell Smith book, I reached out to some of my more studied partners, NRCS, Virginia Cooperative Extension, and Virginia Tech, and asked about it. Being able to look online, I saw that Missouri had cost share for implementing silvopasture, and so after talking to J.B. Daniel and Corey Williams and Dr. Fike down at Virginia Tech, they were interested in trying to figure out how we in Virginia could try it. I believe that I was the first cost share of taking existing pasture to implement silvopasture. And we planted both hardwoods and pines. The pines are what we call trainer trees. Their job is to grow tall and straight and quick to force your hardwoods into a better form and factor. The biggest piece is that it takes management. The trimming of the trees, the management of keeping the fence lines up and things like that. And then ultimately, long-term, depending on what your product is.
And keeping all that in mind, you don't have to be perfect. The objective is to always keep learning the lessons, whatever they are.
The biggest lesson is there's always a lesson. With my travels several years, I wasn't able to prune. The next year when I did prune, you're simulating that competition that they would have in the forest, and all of a sudden a tree that last year only grew 6 inches or 12 inches in 2 months grows 3 feet. And so trimming trees, even if it's a small tree, even if it's a small amount off of a larger tree, I know that I want that tree to feel some sort of competition. And pruning, utilizing those lower branches for fodder, using a hinge cutting method, those are all types of learning lessons. And cattle will take care of almost all of our problems. I was sent overseas, and I got a phone call from Dr. Fike. They came out to check on the place. Because of the implementation method, we chose not to use herbicides in the planting of the trees, and we used what they call a tree scalper, where they take the top 3 inches of the soil and they roll it back so that you've got just clean subsoil so that there's no competition for the tree. What we found in year 2 and 3 is if there's no competition, thistles come in. And so I can grow thistles with the best of them. But in the grand scheme of things, they didn't compete with the trees a whole lot because the thistles are later in the summer, so the trees were able to grow. We had a temporary fence around the trees preventing the cattle from coming in. That's kind of why you can see that it's got kind of grazing pasture and then taller. It took longer than we expected. I had hoped 5 years, and truly to protect the trees, it needed to be 9 to 10. We planted the trees, they had water for a short time, and then it went dry for a couple months, and those young saplings just could not compete. And so we didn't get as good of vitality or mature growth out of that group. It's interesting, you are standing in what we designed as the we'll try it all field. So if you look, this field has got hardwood pines going down on this side, and on that side it goes back and forth as a checkerboard in 2-row sets. If we were to look further back in this field, there are 3-row sets where you've got pines on both sides and hardwoods in the middle, which was a more traditional. We've even expanded in a second set. We have a checkerboard where it goes back and forth all over to spread all of your hardwoods out. We planted a lot of black walnuts. I thought that was going to be my retirement, so we're going to grow these black walnuts. We're going to put in the time and effort to make them straight now. And what we found is that black locust is probably our #1 tree now. It is that forage that got us through the drought of this summer in 2023. And so most of the fodder is lower branches that would have just been trimmed off, and instead of trimming them off, you bend them down to where the cattle can come through and graze them. This year we waited until mid-June or July, when in theory the fescue is the hottest, not knowing it was going to be a drought. That was my intent, was when the fescue is that hot and that toxicosis is just steaming, wanting to, really hit the cow. I like to have that fodder as a secondary feed source, whether the tannins in those black locusts are helping to offset some of the toxicity like Dr. Fike has talked about, or just dilute the amount of fescue they're eating by giving them that. That July, August is when we trim those bottom and bring them down to where the cattle can now get to them, or bring down an entire tree. CREP, Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program, was the first opportunity for a partnership. By us renting our property to the federal government, they helped us with some funding of other needs because we no longer had the stream. So they helped us get watering sources for the cattle. They put up cross fencing. Part of this project was also the Chesapeake Bay Water Initiative. I don't know how new farmers are able to make it financially happen, and CREP was probably the way we were able to do it.
Specifically, it was the only way we would have been able to do it at that time. We had 4 young children, and we were still growing our family, and there was no way we could have started all this without CREP. And then that relationship you described with NRCS really propelled us into other projects, and they have been very supportive of our ideas and our farming practices.
It all comes full circle, NRCS introduced us to VFGC, Virginia Forage and Grassland Council.
Continuing to plant trees is where we want to be. We want to try different species, and we're taking it a little slower than we did initially. The beautiful results we've gotten from the initial plantings have really helped us see that that's where we want to go. In the very long term, I hope that we have instilled an appreciation for the farm with our children, and that they will always be able to come here and feel at home and also enjoy just the beauty of it. And I hope to see how many species we can bring back.
There's a red building up there, the kids' playhouse, which they aren't allowed to use 2.5 months a year because that's my playhouse. And we've seen deer, we've seen bear down through the valley here, as well as most recently we've got some red-tailed hawks. We've got a family of owls that come back every year to our silo, and it's so interesting for the owls. As a side note, we sit by the pool in the evening, and we'll watch the one of the owls go out, and we know where the cattle have just grazed because they have brought the grass down low enough for them to find the food source. And so during the summer, the owls go to different parts of the farm looking for their food source. I pray that my grandchildren are able to find their blessings on this, much like I've been able to with AJ and the kids.
In the long term, we were interested in the investment in trees and how we could maybe make some money 40 years down the road. And in the short term, we were very interested in all the things Buck talked about. There were a couple of summers when we first started farming where we had some 105-degree days, and our Scottish cattle did not like that or do well. And so to increase their gains, we thought lowering the temperature with trees might help.
I would say the most rewarding aspect of this for me is when all 6 of us, AJ and I come out with the kids, and I've got 2 older boys who now can run chainsaws, but the girls even have hand saws.
And I think watching the farm regenerate, it was not managed this way when we took it over. Now, I remember the first time we saw marsh grass come back in the intermittent stream, and there are bird species that weren't here before. That has been really neat to just watch it come back to life in the way it wants to. It matters. It matters a lot.
It does. Every farmer has the desire to produce a high quality, safe feed, no matter how they're doing it, no matter what's going on, and we're doing it the best we can. Often there are ups and downs. We really appreciate the support that we get from especially a local community like this. We sell our beef right now on the hoof to a farmer who goes into farmers markets in DC. He can't afford land over in Culpeper. So he buys animals that I've grown, and then he butchers, and he's taking it to DC. So while my name's not on a package in DC, that, our food isn't just feeding our families anymore.
It is a very holistic practice. So, every practice that we can do that is regenerative in farming, really, it's not only good for the planet, but it's good for our bodies too, and the food we put in it. As a dietitian, Buck and I have collaborated early on this farm that he wanted to grow beef, and I insisted that we research and do the beef the healthiest way possible. And what we've found in doing that is that what's healthy for the soil and the grasses and the trees and the cows is also healthy for us. And so every regenerative practice we put into place that helps our planet and all of the other animals that live on our farm and our cows, it's also helping us.
When we fly into Baltimore every time, I can pick out this farm because of the trees. Wait, nobody asked a question that I can feel that I am the eye candy of the farm, okay?
Oh, sweet man, you are the eye candy.